works for us. We primarily target fish anywhere from 300 out to 1,500 foot of water. And as was mentioned before, electrics are 90% of what we use. We have hand cranked the golden tile fish from 850 feet, and it's not as bad as you might think. You basically have a lot of patience involved. You set your leg up on the gunnel and you slow reel the whole way up. We don't do that with our deep drop weights. We do that on jigs only. So one of the first things that I'll probably go over is what people ask me the most is, how do I drop and get bites on a consistent basis? I've had people say they went out there and they drifted for 3 to 4 hours without a single fish. And I want to say 90% of what happens in order to capitalize on a catch is at the helm of the boat. That's 90% of it. If you're not drifting correctly and timing your top water drift to the bottom current, you're going to spook fish away. So if your bottom current's moving at 2 miles per hour, your wind's blowing you at 8 knots on the surface, and you're dragging 5 pounds of lead across the bottom in the mud, then you're going to spook everything out within a half-mile radius. A lot of what we use when we drop, I'd say most of it is a 4 to 5 foot chicken rig with 11 to 13 knot hooks. Glow in the dark tubing keeps the bait actually off the main line about 4 to 5 inches. And we usually, if we're in anything from 450 out, we'll use strobe lights. And I've experimented with a lot of different lights. I've used the steady lights, purple, greens, and the clear ones seem to work the best for us. Did it work? And you see it. So, and I've had people ask me, how do you place those on your line? And these rigs are about 4 to 5 foot long. So I always place one at my swivel. When I go from the main line to my rig. And depending on the sea conditions and our depth, I might add 4 lights total, I might just run 1. So that I think is very dependent on what you're targeting. A lot of what we're getting right now, because grouper season's closed until May 1st, so we're targeting a lot of yellow edge grouper and golden tiles, which are basically in the same vicinity. If you're running off of Sebastian or Jupiter, you're going to find both of those fish in the same zone. And we usually just run our rig from tilefish right over to yellow edge grouper without changing anything out. The lead that we use, I've experimented with the cannonballs versus the stick weights. All I use when I drop is the 3-pound stick weight. And I know a lot of you guys, if you're fishing inshore, it seems like a lot, but there's a ton of people out there that think they actually have to run 10, 12 pounds of weight on the bottom. But if you're in 600 to 850 foot of water, you're basically in mud. And that's where the tilefish live. And if you're running too much weight or even a cannonball and it's dragging through the mud, you're just stirring up a ton of silt on the bottom and spooking fish away. So the way we try to capitalize on our catches, and we can typically go out within 30 seconds to a minute, we'll have a fish on our electrics. But like I said, it all goes back to how the boat is being handled at the helm and reading the sea conditions, as well as keeping your lead on the bottom without spooking everything out. Another thing that we've come across and we've kind of experimented with it is bait size, and it's really no different than inshore fishing. You try to size your bait to the fish you're targeting. Golden tile fish don't typically have as big of a mouth for their body proportion as a grouper. So we've learned that, and we've seen a lot of people do this, and misconception is they'll take a cut bait and have a 4x4 square. Well, that's a little tough for the tile fish to engulf unless it's a 20 to 30 pound tile fish. So what we do is we try to cut our strips 2 to 3 inches wide and 4 to 5 inches long. They, like every other fish, the way they inhale, they open that mouth and they vacuum suck it in. And that's when we get our hook set. Has anyone ever been offshore tile fishing with electrics before? Yeah, so you know when you get the bite, it's a very, very subtle, just jig at the top of the hole. I've seen a lot of people lose fish they get the bites and they hit the electric, nothing comes up with the fish. And typically it's because their bait size and their bait choice is misproportioned, or it's just simply just too large for the fish to go. Offshore, one of our recent trips, we went out, and I always carry a multitude of baits when I go out there because you don't know what's running in the deep waters. We were out there on one trip and I marked this big blob on my screen. I really couldn't tell what it was until I posted on Facebook and I got some input. Ended up, what we decided was it was a massive squid, probably 3,000 to 4,000 squid running through in our spot, which makes sense because we were dropping squid that day and could not get a bite to save our lives. So basically these squid moves through, the fish fill up on them, and I think their palate changes and the choice of what they want to target changes. We changed our bait up, we put on some cut pokey, frozen pokey, and we got tore up all day long. So I think another key to going on your deep dock trips is finger mullet, squid, pokey, just have an assortment of stuff ready. And finger mullet typically don't work offshore. It's an inshore fish, so it's something strange. But when you're hitting grouper, especially the larger yellow edge grouper and golden tile fish, they don't really get that big. It's pretty dark down there, and they eat almost anything that comes by them. And I will say they are like a lot of other fish. Snook, redfish. I think all fish are opportunists. They either hit the bait out of pure hunger, or two, out of habit. They see it running in front of their face, they want to taste it, kind of like the toddler. So you have to be ready, especially when you're deep dropping. When you get your rig down at 800 foot and you're drifting for a half a mile, and a half a mile can go by in a matter of 5 minutes. You can drift that distance very, very fast out there. So if you do that drift and you have no bites, you've got to be ready to pull up, reset, move your boat, see what the current's doing, try to adjust how you're doing the drift. Does everybody here have a boat capable of going offshore? Pretty much. So I have a 28-foot catamaran, and what I find for me that works is to put the stern into the swells, and that's how I do my drift. I know a lot of guys with a V-hull will put the bow in, and they say it just alleviates some of the beating they get if it's rough offshore. But I'll put the stern into the swells and do a lot of backing down the entire day. So, and another thing to try to determine when you're out there deep dropping is the speed of the current on the bottom. And without some high gear technology, you're not going to know that. So what we do is we'll drop our rigs down, and as soon as the weight hits the bottom, you lock your reel in, and you'll see the reel just boom. It's basically pulling that weight in the mud and getting you back vertical. I've learned to basically kind of scope the change of that line and how it pulls underneath the boat, how long it takes. That tells me what the current's moving on the bottom. Or you can lock everything back in vertical. Your line's got to be perfectly vertical. Look at your nav system and basically see, while you're in, for me, would be hard reverse, basically keeping the line vertical using my boat and telling me how fast I'm drifting. That tells me what the speed of the current is on the bottom. And of course, if you just lock your boat out neutral, you can see what the drift is on top. So that, I think, is key. It's very, very crucial. If you get those two things off, you're going to have a really hard time actually hooking up the fish. You'll get lucky, everyone does. At some point, every dog gets a bone. But driving at the helm of the boat is crucial. I've had friends of mine to go out with me, and they actually give me a chance to fish instead of drive the boat. And because they don't know my vessel, and they don't know what I do to keep that boat positioned for them, I never catch them. So we made up a rule: when I have the friends go out with me, captain gets choice. Whatever they catch, I like it, I take it home. Another thing that I've been asked is, we fished out there, I think one of my last trips, we went out and the seas turned nasty. We had 10-foot swells at about 7 to 8 seconds. When I was younger, I rode in the rodeo, and it reminded me of being on a horse that's butting because the boat, the stern of it would come up so high. we still caught fish. And it's a lot of people don't know how to work the reel, how much line to let out, when to let it out. So whenever I get into a sea that's, I'm gonna say 3.5 to 4 foot or greater, if my depth is 800 feet, I'm gonna have close to 2,000 foot of line out. But how you time it and how you let it out will depend on whether or not you get a hookup. So, and it's basically the same thing, even in inshore close. If it gets rough and you're trying to maintain bottom, you wait until the boat rocks up and you let the line out. When the boat comes back down, you hold it steady. That's where we fish at. Is, like I said, it's a lot of mud. So if your weight is being snatched on the bottom every time the boat lifts, then you're spooking away everything you're trying to catch. I put up a little advertisement to kind of let people know that we would live stream this, and I promised everybody I would give them a couple of tricks that I've picked up along the way. And if you fish anywhere offshore, even a few miles on a reef, you can use this. Some of you may have been using it for years, I don't know. But any tackle shop you go into, at the cash register, there's a little cardboard bin and it's full of oxygen tablets. That's one of my tricks. If I can't get a bite offshore, if I'm using squid or cut bait, it really doesn't matter. On my squid, I simply take the oxygen tablet, I slide it inside the body of the squid, I hook him in at its front, go back, hook him in back to the tablet, and it holds the tablet in the body of the squid. You have a lot of bubble time on one of those tabs. So you can send it down 800 feet and you're basically going to bubble the whole time that bait's on the bottom. And it will drive the fish absolutely crazy. It's like setting a box of donuts in front of me. Can't resist it. So, and it works, like I said, if you're at 80, 90 feet and you're trying to track smaller grouper, triggerfish, lane snappers, mangroves, muttons. Muttons may be a little different because they're definitely a little shyer fish. But if you're in shallow water, just break a small piece of the tablet off, slide it inside your bait, and you don't have to do anything fancy. I had an older guy tell me once to keep it simple, stupid. And I've lived by that motto. I don't get real fancy. The electric reels we use in the deep water is as fancy as I get. But just use common sense and you will notice a huge difference if you're bottom fishing on your catch ratio. So you gotta think, the oxygen tablets are not only putting out the bubbles and the vibration, but they're also sending the scent of your bait into the water, a little heavier than it would normally if you're just dragging on bottom.
What's an oxygen tablet? What is it?
What's that?
What did you just say? Oxygen tablet?
Oxygen tablet. So if you have a bucket of live bait, you wanna keep them alive, but you don't have an aerator, they sell the tablets you drop in the water and bubbles.
They're called OTABs.
There you go. I keep it simple, so I never track the names of the stuff. But it works. I tried it.
Before going back a little bit, you said when you're fishing in Sebastian or Jupiter.
Mm-hmm.
What about us right here?
It is still the same thing. Same thing.
I mean, when you said that, it's like, well, fish here, or it won't work, or no?
No, it will.
Oh,
Absolutely.
okay.
No, I just gave you a kind of broad range of that distance, but your fishery is going to be the same, very, very close to the same from Jacksonville to Fort Lauderdale, Miami, whatever. The only difference is how far you have to go to get to it. So you're going to come across, when you're running offshore, you're going to come across the shallow reefs, which I say are 60 to 90 feet. You'll get a lot of sandy hard bottom. From there out to what for us would be 300 feet. 170 to 300 is where we get some more rock structure. And after that, you drop down dramatically into the mud. With our yellow edge grouper, we can go 5 miles from our tile grounds back in and be on yellow edge grouper. And when we fish for those, we typically don't need a big arsenal of bait. It's mainly full squid, large squid, or a full pogie, a fish at least 6 to 8 inches in length. Those guys, they like the bigger baits. We've tried cut baits, cut squid before, and we just can't capitalize on those. Another difference is, yes?
Yeah, when you're in those
those depths, what are you looking for in your bottom machine?
So on the bottom machine, I look for the color tone. If I'm in tile grounds where it's a mud bottom, I look for on my machine, and I have an old system for Runo Navnet too. It's outdated, but I know it, and it works great for me. So on my machine, a mud bottom is gonna show a very thin red line on the floor. When I hit rock structure, which a lot of machines do the same thing, rock structure is gonna have a thicker height of red, showing that the density is a lot more mass there. But on mud bottom, you wanna look for a thin red line. That's basically telling you that you have a soft layer on the floor and nothing hard underneath it. Golden tilefish will make a burrow, and they stay with that burrow their entire life. So, and you gotta think, average, let's say 20-pound tilefish can range anywhere from 20 to 40 years in age. So they're slow growing fish, and they generally, like I said, they make a burrow, they stay with that burrow in the same zone, so they're with, the other tiles that are around them, they've been with them for years. They're not a migrating fish, they don't move as much from one location to the next. I guess they have been tracked from occasion, they move, depending on currents and food sources and such. But they pretty much maintain the same zone year round.
How far offshore do you have to, from, let's say, Fort Pierce, how far offshore do you have to go before you get into the deep water?
Into the
600 feet.
Into the deep water, to say 600 feet, you're running about 20 to 25 miles maybe. Out of Sebastian, which is not really much difference. We run 25 to 28 to hit those depths.
Okay.
What do you get for a trip?
What's that?
What's your cost for a trip?
I do both private and shared charters. When I started chartering, it was the split charters that put me on the map. And I always wanted to make sure that the person that couldn't afford a full private charter could fish with us. So my shared charters are $300 a person for 8 hours, and private is $1,000. So I max my trips on a private boat. Of course, I have a 6-pack, so I can take 6 paying clients on a private. A shared charter, I limit it to 4. It's a little easier on me, and it gives 4 strangers a chance to have more fishing time. One other thing I wanted to speak on the golden tile versus grouper is, you guys might have heard of the laydown rigs. A lot of commercial boats will use them when they're deep water fishing, especially for golden tile. They'll have a half a mile worth of line, lay it down, hundreds of hooks, and they want it laying flat on the floor of the ocean. Grouper, I tend to want my line coming up. So when we're drifting for golden tile, that line is going straight vertical, no scope whatsoever. Grouper, yellow edge grouper, I put as much scope as I can while keeping my weight on the bottom. And that's where a lot of things come into play when you're trying to determine how to set your rig up and how to drift it. Swell size, wind speed at the top, your current on the bottom, how fast it's moving, how hard is it going to be to get your rig to lay flat. If you have 2 alternating speeds, your air surface is pushing you at 8 knots, your bottom current's running at 3, and of course, you may have to change it up, add a little more weight, or what I've done in the past is, when I hook these rigs up to my main line, I'll take a 24-ounce bank weight and put there. And then at the bottom, I'll use anywhere from a 3 to a 10 pound, depending on the current. So when the lead gets, my rig gets to the bottom, it basically lays it flat. And that works really great too if you're in swell sizes of 4 foot plus. When we were out last time, I had to put 8 pounds on the bottom and 5 pounds of weight at the top of my rig in order to get it to lay on the ground, on the floor of the ocean, in order to catch fish. It kind of sucks for the electric, it really struggles, but it's exciting. I mean, as soon as you get a fish coming up, it looks like you have a 60-pound fish. There's so much damn lead on the thing, it just doubles the rod over, so. Yeah, I guess everyone's blood pumping anyways on a boat, you know.
What kind of rigs do you use, honey? What kind of motors?
What kind of levers?
No, what kind of motors?
Motors?
Yeah, what kind
On
of
boat?
stuff?
Or the
The reels. the electric reels.
So I have Banex, and that's what I bought, in order to start getting serious with deep dropping. Before that, we would hand crank. I have a couple of two-speed 50 wides, and we would hand crank some fish out the bottom with 5 to 6 pounds of weight, and it sucked. The first 50 feet was really fun. But the electrics we use now, they're Banex Tigan 1000s. They've been good reels. The only downfall, I guess, when Banex started making them, the level lines, which feeds your line back and forth, were weak. They now have a Banex Tigan 1500, which I hear has a really upgraded level line system. The other upside to a Banex is that the guy that services them is in Louisiana, Frigate Sales, and he's awesome to work with. If you like old school customer service and you're thinking about an electric reel, I'd say start with a Banex 1000 or 1500. James with Frigate Sales will treat you right if you ever need service for anything. Any questions on them up here?
You ever use, jack for bait or mackerel or anything, what are your fish?
I have. I've tried basically everything you can think of, from hardhead catfish to mullet, I mean, everything, just to experiment and see what's going on. Bonita works pretty good. For some reason, jacks, I don't know what it is about it, but I haven't gotten them to hit it that much. As far as the yellow edge grouper, I stick with squid or pokey. I've tried a mixture of baits for those, and they have no interest in it. But for the golden tile fish, bonita works really well. Yes, sir.
What do you consider pokies?
I'm
I
not
mean-
sure.
I mean, up north, they're bunker, you go up further
Same.
south, they're
Yes.
pokies, you go here, they call them shad, so I'm just trying to.
Basically, same thing, nice pretty silver fish with a yellow tail. And I've had some clients from up north on a boat, and they say, yeah, we call these monkeys from where I'm from.
What is the cost of the rod and reel gonna be?
Your Banex, and I bought my setups from Strike Zone in Melbourne. Very cool place. If you guys haven't ever made a trip and you want to see a cool little store, they kind of tailor to everything, but they are really serious about their heavy duty sports fishing. I bought my rod and reel, bent rod with swivel tips, and I think I got a deal. I paid $900 to $1,000 for the setup, first setup. So it's really not that bad. I mean, you know, if you look at a hooker or LP, something like that, you're going to spend, or used one, you're going to spend $4,500. But the other side to it is if you ever want to hit swords, you're set. That or. But if it's not something, and trust me guys, I use these things every single trip pretty much. And I've had clients come on a boat that either have a handicap disability, they can't hand crank in 200 to 300 foot of water, so we'll set the electric up with them. I typically don't like doing that on off season where grouper season's closed, because if we bring up a red snapper or a grouper there with an electric and 200 to 300 foot, they're dead. There's no way they're gonna survive. And these reels are variable speed, but when you're fishing at depth and you have the ability to bring your catch up fast to keep it from getting sharp, you're not going half throttle on your electric, you're going full blast.
Alright, I got a question for you. With a flying man, you're gonna go out there and fish.
Yeah.
If you can be able to feel it.
Absolutely, absolutely, yep. So, and especially, even in deep water, if you're 850 foot of water and you have 12 to 1600 foot of line out, a golden tile fish can hit it so subtle that you won't even see it. I've done it long enough that I can see the difference between a weight dragging, moving the rod tip, and a fish doing it. And I've said before, that women are probably easier to figure out than golden tile. But, but to answer your question,
I
yes.
can tell you're sleeping on the couch
Yeah,
tonight.
Hey, Ralph.
Yeah.
Hey, Ralph, you heard that, right, Ralph? Okay.
But, we've had a lot of clients that have grown up with a theory of they keep their hand on the line and they can feel a bite. I don't do that. I've been cut before, hand on the line, get a big fish, hit it, and start snatching drag and splicing my finger. But deep dropping is a different story. You'd pretty much have to hit a submarine to cut yourself if you're running your finger on the line. But the bite is still strong enough that you can feel it, yes. Yes,
Your
sir.
primary charter is out of Sebastian?
I am. Primary is out of Sebastian. I do trailer my boat so that I'm mobile. I've had customers want me to come up to the Cape and take them out. Some of them come to Fort Pierce, Jupiter, wherever, Fort St. Lucie, and charter them out from there. But 99% of my charters do run out of Sebastian.
Out of Hiram's Resort?
No, I trailer and I put in next to Mulligan's, boat ramp next to Mulligan's. Yep. Any other questions?
Sir, what's with the multi-hook you have? You ever get multi-fish hitting at the same?
We do. Usually on golden tile fish, I've gotten snowy grouper, multiple snowy grouper. Yellow-edged grouper, no. Golden tile fish, yes, but they're always the smaller ones. Usually, the smaller golden tile, and I'm gonna say is anywhere from 6 to 12 pounds, is a smaller golden tile fish. They're a lot less skittish. They've only been around for 10 to 15 years versus 20 or 30. So they're gonna hit it. If it looks like something's wrong with the setup, they're gonna hit it before a bigger fish will. We usually get, it's kind of a 50-50 mixture, whether we get a nice 20 to 30 pound tile, or if we just get 6 to 10 pound tile. But we have learned that presentation at the bottom is key to the bigger fish. And it's pretty much anywhere else you fish as well. And whether it's snook in the river or, snapper in 90 feet. It's the same concept. The only thing is, you have a little more challenge offshore because you can't anchor, and trying to use a spot lock trolling motor to sit in the same position isn't gonna work either.
Does tile fish have a soft mouth, or does it, hook once it's set pretty well, it's gonna stick?
It's pretty much where it's gonna stick, yeah. Even the skin around their mouth, I've had the hooks dig into the skin alone and basically wallow the hole to an inch diameter. We've got lucky and gotten them up, but the skin is super, super strong on the tile fish. A lot of guys in the old days would use tile fish fillets for swordfish and bait. The skin is really thin, but super strong. Yeah. Now we've hooked a lot of tile fish before where we're in 600 feet of water and we get them up to 300 foot, 200 foot from the surface, and all of a sudden the fish comes off. And a lot of people freak out. I'm like, just give it 10 minutes. 10 minutes. And 10 minutes later, 100 yards off, we see a little white thing floating in the water. So, and a lot of them is because it hasn't actually bone hooked, lip hooked. It's gotten the skin, and on the way up, they get a burst of energy, and they're actually facing up, so they kick and come off the hook. But they don't blow up like a grouper would at that depth. We've actually descended some golden tiles before they were too small and had success at it.
Do you find the biggest fight is at the bottom, or maybe like
No.
the last 50 feet of the water?
All the way up.
All the way?
All the way up. And that's another big difference between grouper and golden edge, golden tile. And if you've never had golden tile before, in my opinion, you can't get a better tasting fish off of our waters. It's absolutely pristine. But golden tile, you'll get a subtle hit at the bottom. When you start bringing them up, I'm gonna say for the first 75 feet, they really tug, and then they kind of stop. And when they get, let's say if we're fishing in 600 foot of water, when they hit that 300 foot zone, my concept is they start getting a little bit of daylight in their eyes. Their vision is super, because where they live, it's super dark. We couldn't see the hand in front of our face, but their eyes are tuned in to find bait, which they use eyesight as well. So I think they get a little sense of the daylight and they come alive. I've had plenty of them stop the electric reel and start pulling line out after they come up 300 feet. And we've had them fight 20 feet below the surface on the way up to it. So they're very hardy fish.
You lose many coming up with predators?
We do not. Really? No. At that depth, you usually don't find sharks out there, until you're like me and you're stupid enough that you wanna swim a 900 foot. And someone on the boat says, "Hey, shark," and you turn around and there's a 10-foot bull shark 2 feet from you. But no, we don't. Usually out there, you're pretty much alone. You know, there's some great whites that track that system, and every now and then you'll get a bull shark that just ventures off the reef to come see what's going on. We don't even get the shark nose and such at that depth. Now, if we're fishing over a reef in 200 or 300 feet of water, we'll get a lot of shark nose, we'll get some bull sharks, but typically they're at the bottom. They don't care what's at the top.
You're out there at, say 300 to 800 feet. What's your average, drift? Your current drift?
I gotta say, for the past 6 months, it has been as wacky as it gets and very hard to predict. The weather, and I'm sure you guys have noticed that even inshore has been crazy. Typical drift is 2.5 to 3 knots.
Oh, okay.
2.5 to 3 knots. Now, that's also with me backing that boat down. So
Okay.
our drift is pushing us due north, I'm
So
backing
you're
down
saying you're
south.
probably running a good 5 now?
Yeah, your top current's running 5 to 6, between the current, the Gulf Stream and the wind, you're running 5 to 6, the bottom, you're running 2 to 3 knots.
So you're constantly under power?
Yes.
So you don't trust the spot lock or anything?
No, absolutely not. And you can try to spot lock and keep yourself positioned, but your lead, your bait's gonna be half a mile from your boat. And that is gonna be halfway up in the water column. We've actually dropped 6 pounds of weight before and had it float. We dropped down, and that's why, when we drop our lead, and we hit bottom, we lock it in. And our weight's 100 yards from the boat, but as soon as we lock it in, we notice a rod that bows down, and it's pulling, dragging that weight back under us. Well, we've done that before where we thought we hit bottom, but the dial's wrong, and I think, well, maybe it's the reel. So we lock it in, and we drop it again. So that 6 pound of weight hits the thermal pocket down there, and it's super warm, it will float that lead. Between the current pulling your line and the water temp difference, you hit a nice hot pocket, it'll float 6 pounds.
I got enough problems worrying about a fly in 3 foot of water.
Yeah.
You get the rosy bellies down there, or the rose bellies, or whatever they call it?
Rare, yeah.
Like
We-
And also, what's
There's a couple of spots, and I probably shouldn't say this because we are streaming, but there's a couple of spots in around 1,500 foot to hold some nice fish that I'd rather not mention.
So what's your recipe for the fish?
Tile fish, cooking wise, well, I had a good friend of mine, Dov, invite us for dinner, and this guy is a class 1 chef. And he did a corn, a base of basically corn that he creamed a lot of it, put the fish on top, and what else did he have there? I can't remember what else they had on top, but it was absolutely amazing. We've cooked some before and I love it baked. You can bake it, fry it, and grill it, and you'll get a different texture and a different flavor on each one. But I like it baked. You season it up with your Everglades, whatever you want. Super coat it in honey. Lay some basil and parsley down and some lemon on top of that. Bake it, and when it's 5 minutes from being done, put some crushed Ritz crackers on the top. Pull it out and serve it, and it's really good, delicious.
Do you find any difference from the current, per se, out there from spring, winter to summer, or no?
Oh yeah, absolutely.
It's more or less?
Yeah, so our water temp out there, and inshore, and I'll say that, I went out in the river the other day, our water temp was pushing some spots down to 64 to 67. You go offshore on the same day, you're gonna hit 80 to 82 degrees on the top. But as the summer progresses, we get all of the tropical heat building south of us, pushing a lot of warmer water north. Usually if the wind's in our favor, the current is better. So you don't have, let's say 50 degrees on the bottom, 80 degrees on the top. It's 2 drastic temperature changes. And I think it kind of separates that water and it separates the Gulf Stream and actually pushes it twice as fast as it would mid-August.
So, do you get these, what we call here, cold water upwellings out 600-800 feet?
Oh, yes.
And if so, does that like turn the light off?
No.
Like it doesn't here?
It doesn't. No, when you're at that depth, you have very, very little that's gonna turn your bite off, other than how you handle your boat and how you present your baits. We've been out there on full moons, we've been out there with thunderstorms coming up where the pressure's changing, atmospheric pressure's changing drastically. All kinds of conditions that you can think of that would shut the bite down in shallower water, basically has no effect on the deep water fish that we've seen. The only effect we've seen is one, how you present the bait, and two, what kind of natural baits move through their area the day or two before. It's, like I said, it's a deep water charter companies go to when grouper season's closed, snapper season's closed. And it's become extremely popular, I wanna say in the past year, mainly because the electric reels went from this size to this size. I've had guys come on a boat with a small 12-volt battery in a bag, with a sling, and their electric reel, and that's what they do. Some guys use it on piers, I've been told. I wouldn't, but if it's their thing, it's great. But the price of it has come down drastically, the convenience of it has improved, so it's getting more people the chance to fish deep water that technically couldn't afford to do so otherwise. Good. All right, guys, thank you.